One simple line, one simple idea led to the creation of one of the most treasured films of all time. I'm Frank Capra, Jr. My father directed more than his share of classic movies. Films like It Happened One Night, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Arsenic and Old Lace, Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, and many, many others. My dad made all kinds of movies, but he preferred stories that were optimistic and uplifting. His movies were positive, wholesome, and sentimental, qualities that were rare even in Dad's heyday of the 30s and 40s, and mostly non-existent in movies today. Of all my father's great films, he always told me that It's a Wonderful Life was his favorite. The idea was unique. A man finds out what the world would have been like if he had never been born. And the theme, that everyone's life touches so many other lives, was one that moved my dad more deeply than any other idea he ever worked with.
Your brother, Harry Bailey, broke through the ice and was drowned at the age of 9.
That's a lie. Harry Bailey went to war. He got the Congressional Medal of Honor. He saved the lives of every man on that transport.
Every man on that transport died. Harry wasn't there to save them because you weren't there to save Harry.
It's a Wonderful Life is the story of George Bailey, an ordinary man in a small town. He feels that life has passed him by. But through a bit of divine intervention in the person of an angel named Clarence Oddbody, he learns just how important and loved he really is. The film is more than the story of just one man. It's also a kind of tour of America in the first half of our century, from 1919 through the Roaring Twenties, the Great Depression, World War II, and the post-war period. It's a Wonderful Life is a sentimental film, yes, but it's also an honest one. It explores the pain of normal life as well as the joy.
I wondered what in the hell kind of a picture should I make now. I certainly wasn't going to make any pictures about war. I was so sick of war. I hated the damn war. It was terrible things that should have been eliminated years and years and years ago. And here they are shooting and bombing and each other. I was not very happy with it anymore. I was very active, but I'm not very happy about the human race. So I wasn't going to make a picture about war. I had enough of that. What kind of a picture shall I make? I didn't know.
Cinematically, It's a Wonderful Life builds on themes and scenes that had already figured in my father's films. The run on the bank in It's a Wonderful Life recalls the climax of his 1932 film American Madness. And the notion of a desperate suicidal man saved by those who believe in him showed up in Dad's classic Meet John Doe in 1941. But in no other film was my dad's skill and talent so thoroughly utilized. He made It's a Wonderful Life at the peak of his creative powers. And although I was pretty young at the time, I do remember how excited my father was when he formed Liberty Films with his partner Sam Briskin and his fellow directors William Wyler and George Stevens. This was a real first, because in those days, directors were thought of as studio employees. Liberty Films gave this talented group unprecedented creative freedom. It's a Wonderful Life was the company's first production.
I had a perfect cast. Everything was perfect about the picture. Just plain luck.
My father's first piece of luck regarding It's a Wonderful Life came in 1945 when an RKO executive brought a story called The Greatest Gift to his attention. The Greatest Gift was a short story by author Philip Van Doren Stern. When Stern couldn't sell his story, he decided to print up 200 copies of it and enclose it in his Christmas cards. RKO Pictures bought the story in 1943 for $10,000. While the studio liked the story, nobody was quite sure what to do with it. 3 different scripts were commissioned. Such noted writers as Mark Connolly, Clifford Odets, and Dalton Trumbo. Each of these writers contributed elements that would end up in the finished film. But the screenplays took some bizarre turns on the way. For instance, there was no villainous Mr. Potter in any of these scripts.
I'm offering you a 3 years contract at $20,000 a year starting today. Is it a deal or isn't it?
Instead, Mark Connolly created two Georges.
Well, Mr. Plunner, I know I ought to jump at the chance, but I just...
In that version, instead of seeing the world as if he had never been born, George finds a world with a bad George in it, the rich, cold man he might have been if he had lived his life differently. Clifford Odets picked up on this idea, but in his version, the two Georges end up slugging it out on the bridge, where the good George kills the bad George. I remember how moved my father was by The Greatest Gift, but he didn't feel that any of the three scripts caught its special flavor. He tried to use some of the previous writers' good ideas, but he knew that he would have to write the script himself if The Greatest Gift, which he then retitled It's a Wonderful Life, would affect others as it had affected him. It was when my father started to cast the film that his second piece of good luck came along. The role of George Bailey went to my father's old pal, Jimmy Stewart.
Jimmy Stewart got out of the Army about the same time I did, and he said, his agent said to me, Jimmy wants to make a picture with you. And in a few days I went to Jimmy, I said, Jimmy, I got a great story, would you like to do it? I didn't have to tell him. He says, you bet. So we signed up right away, and that was it.
I've had such wonderful good fortune in my life, and I think this is one of the pieces of good fortune that I have that I'll never forget.
Jimmy Stewart had already worked with my dad in two great pictures, You Can't Take It With You and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Audiences everywhere loved Jimmy's down-home charm.
Thanks ever so much for the bag. It's just exactly what I wanted.
Oh, forget it.
Oh, it's wonderful of you to think of me.
Enjoy it.
I wish I had $1 million.
But Dad knew Jimmy was also a great dramatic actor, capable of showing George Bailey's other, more bitter side.
And did you put the envelope in your pocket?
Yeah, no, maybe.
Maybe, I don't want any maybe. We've got to find that money.
In casting the important role of George's wife, Mary, Dad had to look beyond RKO to another studio.
This big studio system, and they loaned people. They did this, they loaned directors, they loaned writers, but you were working all the time. You worked 6 days a week. You learned your craft by working at it.
We borrowed a girl from MGM. I don't know whether Donna Reed was from MGM, or she's from MGM. Yep, she was. And she was perfect for the part, just perfect.
It's George Bailey, Mother.
George Bailey? What's he want?
I don't know. What do you want?
Me? Not a thing. I just came in to get warm.
He's making violent love to me, Mother.
Not only did he cast the leads perfectly, he stocked the film with some of the greatest character actors in Hollywood. Thomas Mitchell.
Where's my hat? Where's my hat? Oh, thank you, George. Which is mine?
The metal one.
Beulah Bondi.
Oh, that's for nothing.
Gloria Graham.
Well, I only wear it when I don't care how I look.
Frank Albertson. Frank Phelan and Ward Bond. The original Bert and Ernie.
George. Hey, I'm a rich tourist today. How about driving me home in style? Huh?
Hop in, Your Highness, hop in. And for the carriage freight, I put on my hat.
And the great Lionel Barrymore.
George, I am an old man, and most people hate me, but I don't like them either, so that makes it all even.
My dad brought in two great writers, Albert Hackett and Francis Goodrich, to help him polish the script. But my father always felt that although a movie is a collaboration among dozens, sometimes hundreds of people, there must always be one single creative mind behind it all. That's why each of my father's pictures is so easily identifiable as a Frank Capra film. Beyond the great performances from Jimmy Stewart, Donna Reed, and the rest of the wonderful cast, and the work of all the people behind the scenes, this film was my father's personal vision from beginning to end. He put more of himself on screen in Wonderful Life than in any other film. In fact, I remember he once told me, "It's the picture I waited my whole life to make."
there's more to the picture than I put in it. That there's more to the picture than was written in it. There's more value. More values in the picture than we knew we were playing with, and that we didn't expect. And that's probably the answer to it. That there's more to it than we thought we had.
Everybody loves It's a Wonderful Life today, so it's a little hard to believe that it wasn't all that popular when it first opened. For one thing, the East Coast was experiencing record low temperatures, heavy dumpings of snow and ice. Most people just stayed at home, listened to the radio. Also, even though we consider It's a Wonderful Life to be one of the most heartwarming pictures ever made, audiences back then considered it to be just too depressing for the holiday season. The film was by no means a box office flop, but within a few months, it was out of sight and out of mind. Interestingly, modern audiences began to rediscover It's a Wonderful Life, in part because of a legal loophole. In the early 1970s, copyright on the film expired. It could have been renewed for another 28 years, but a clerical slip-up allowed it to enter the public domain. This means that anyone could do anything they wanted with the picture. While this was bad news for the copyright holder, it was great news for television stations across the country, which could now play the film whenever they wanted, without paying any royalties. Word of mouth began to spread. More and more people fell in love with the picture. Within a few years, It's a Wonderful Life began showing up so often on television that now the holiday season wouldn't seem the same without it.
Hey! Merry Christmas, Mr. Potter! Happy New Year to you! In jail!
It's amazing how popular that is all over the world.
It's a Wonderful Life, like its hero George Bailey, went through times of both optimism and despair. Also like George Bailey, the film was rescued from oblivion by its friends. The film might not have made a fortune for my father and the others who worked on it, but it has enriched the lives of every person who ever fell under its warm, joyful spell.
I think that as time goes by, it'll just go more and more popular. Because it's a theme that hits everybody. Everybody has gone through that thing when they practically rather die than live. So that's why I think that the picture will live on beyond our time.
Attaboy, Clarence.
It is a wonderful life.
Now, please join me in enjoying once again my father's original uncut version of It's a Wonderful Life.